It's me, I'm back. You might have noticed, as usual, that I had a little break from making videos. I actually took a couple of weeks off to finish my novel, which I have done, yay! So I'm back and I wanted to make a video in time for Halloween. I love Halloween, as you might have noticed. We've been decorating, we've got, you can only see this, but we've got Halloween stuff everywhere. So I was having a think about what I could do. I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I've decided to do the 5 most underrated horror novels. But the first one I'm going to recommend isn't really underrated because it's getting a lot of hype at the moment. It's just been released. It's the only really YA title on my list, and it's The Fall by Bethany Griffin. It's one of the best books I've read this year. I absolutely loved it. I read it over about 2 or 3 weeks actually because I was just enjoying it so much. I limited myself to just reading like a chapter a day because I just wanted to drag it out as long as possible because the writing's absolutely beautiful. It is a YA release, but it does feel like it has a lot of crossover appeal. I think horror's one of the only genres where age range isn't really applicable. I think a lot of teenagers read adult horror. That's how I got started in horror. I got started straight on Stephen King when I was like 12 years old, and that's what got me into the genre. We don't really get a lot of YA horror releases, so when one comes along that's as good as The Fall, it really deserves a lot of attention because it's a really underrepresented genre in YA. Even though, like I said before, I think horror's one of those genres where age range really isn't applicable. If it's scary, it's scary. What I like about The Fall is that it feels really classic and timeless. It doesn't feel like something that was released in 2014. I guess it could be the fact it's based on an old Edgar Allan Poe short story that makes it feel so classic, but Bethany Griffin just does the most amazing job at bringing this story to life and staying true to the original but breathing some new life into the story as well. Next up we have one of my favourites, which I feel very defensive about, and it is Now You're One of Us by Asa Nanami. It's the story of a young girl who's just married into quite a close-knit, elusive family. And she's just got married to one of the sons, so she moves into the family home and she's sort of embraced by the family, but the longer she lives in their sort of big isolated house and she gets to know all the different branches of the family because they all sort of live together, the more she realises something sort of a bit amiss and something maybe a bit dark is going on. I'm not going to say any more than that because I didn't know a thing about this book when I bought it. I barely even read the blurb. I picked it solely on the cover. So I'm going to insert a picture so you can see it because I will always think this is one of the best covers of all time. And anything you need to know about the story is summed up on the cover. When you see the cover, the feeling it gives you, that's the feeling you'll have as you're reading this book. It's just so weird and creepy and unsettling. And it's brilliant. It's really badly reviewed online and it has a really low, I think it's like 3.5 on Goodreads, and I'm so shocked by that. I think it deserves to be so much higher, and there's a lot of 1-star reviews, and I guess it's because maybe people didn't realise quite how dark and messed up it was going to be before they went into reading it. But I think it's brilliant. If you're looking for something that's going to kind of disturb you and you're going to want to talk about and is going to leave you thinking like, what the hell did I just read? Then you need to go for this book. It will be perfect for you. And at number 3, we have another novel set in Japan, because the book I just mentioned is also set in Japan. The one I'm going to talk about now is In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. If you're a horror fan, you're probably familiar with his work. He wrote Piercing, and he also wrote Audition. Audition's just something else, but it got quite a lot of attention because of the film. So today I thought I'd talk about In the Miso Soup. This is an adult book, and it is the story of a young boy in Tokyo who works as a kind of after-hours tour guide. He kind of shows businessmen around the city, can show them sort of sex clubs and exclusive clubs, and it's just before New Year's Eve, and he has this kind of overweight American tourist businessman type guy who hires him. So as he's working and as he's taking him around the city and as he's kind of getting to know him a little bit over the few days that they spend together, Kenji starts to realise that there's something a bit off about this businessman. He can't quite put his finger on what it is, but he's feeling creeped out and there's something weird about this American guy, Frank. and he starts to suspect that he might be a serial killer who's terrorizing Tokyo before New Year's Eve. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to tell you if anything's true or what happens or what's going on. But yeah, it's one of those where you have no idea what's going on until the last few pages. It's a really disturbing book, but I can't quite explain why it's disturbing. It's just the language he chooses is really clever, and it just really, everything about it comes together to create a real sense of unease. And Ralph McCarthy was the translator for the English version, and I think he did such an incredible job to obviously retain the kind of horror and suspense that's in the original version. I think to do that in a translation takes real skill, so I was really impressed by that. Next up is a book I think I've mentioned before, but I'm going to talk about it again because it's one of my favourites. It's another adult horror, and it's called Come Closer, and it's by Sarah Gran. And it's the story of a woman living in New York who thinks she's being possessed by a demon. And what's really different about this book is that it's very much her internal feelings. It's very much what's happening in her head and what's going on from her point of view as she thinks she's getting taken over by this entity. So it's not just a case of she's fine one day and then when we next see her she's crazy and she's murdering everyone and no one really knows why. It's not that kind of book. It's really understated, and it's just this kind of sort of creeping factor in her brain, and she doesn't really know what's going on and why she's thinking these things, and it's all these coincidences lead her to think maybe she's being possessed. And it's sort of up to us to decide really whether she is being possessed, whether she's suffering from a mental disorder. It's just up to us to kind of uncover what's going on, and we don't really realise what's happening until right at the end of the book. It's really clever. It will really get under your skin. It has this sort of checklist near the beginning, which is a bit funnier. I think it's something she finds in a magazine or online, and it's how to tell if you're being possessed by a demon. And it's quite fun to kind of go through that checklist and be like, oh crap, I do that. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's really unique. I haven't read anything like it. I can't think of a sort of movie equivalent just because it's so in depth. You see everything through her eyes and what she's going through. And I think that's something really that can only be brought to life through a book. I don't think that's anything that could be translated to the big screen. Last on my list is HeartShaped Box by Joe Hill. If you think the name is familiar, then it's probably because of Horns. The movie starring Daniel Radcliffe, which is coming really, really soon, which is based on his novel of the same name. This is one of his earlier books. It's the first book of his that I read, and it blew me away because I don't know what I was expecting. I'd seen it on a blog or a website somewhere saying it's quite a creepy read, so I just ordered it without really reading anything else about it. So HeartShaped Box is the story of Judas, who is a rock star, and he's kind of arrogant and self-obsessed. He's just a bit of a douchey, famous rock star, and he collects kind of weird, creepy artifacts, and he has things in his collection like sketches from a serial killer, and like skulls, and he just collects all that kind of stuff. And then one day he sees an auction for a ghost for sale, and he knows he has to buy it because he has to have it in his collection. So he does buy it, and it arrives in this black heart-shaped box, and inside the box is a suit that belongs to the man, and then the box is also supposed to contain his spirit. And the rest of the book is just about what happens after the box arrives and things start to get a bit dark. This is quite different from the other books on the list in that it's more of a sort of pure, classic, straightforward horror novel. It's got gore, it's got sex, which you often get in horror. It's got all of those things that we've come to love from horror. It does play with psychological aspects, but I'd say when you compare it to something like Come Closer, which is totally psychological, this HeartShaped Box feels more like a straightforward horror. So that is my list of the top 5 most underrated horror novels. I hope some things I've said have inspired you to pick up at least one of them. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought of them. If you want to read any of these, let me know. And make sure you Google the cover for Now You're One of Us and let me know what you think of it, okay? And I'll see you all very soon, and happy Halloween. Bye!